mock modesty that I am probably about the humblest individual to have ever been elevated to the office of the United States presidency. I have been called unqualified, unprepared, unkempt, unattractive, uneducated, which is largely true, although what little advance I got on the great store of education that I managed to accumulate, I had to get on my own. I'm what we former Whigs like to call ourselves, a self-made man. Although I realize that Democrats don't always appreciate that. I had a fellow one time come up to me, actually it was after the Republican convention here in Illinois, and he said, "Did I hear you saying there you was a self-made man?" I said, "Well, sir, what there is of me is pretty well self-made." He said, "Well, I think you did a blame poor job of it." Then he says, "I wouldn't vote for you if you were St. Peter himself." I looked at him and I said, "Well, my friend, if I were St. Peter, you probably wouldn't be in my district anyway." So, regardless, I will tell you, though, that 4 years ago when we left Illinois, we were faced with a circumstance perhaps unlike that of any other president. All eyes were focused upon the possibility of civil war. All dreaded it. And I believe we're seeking to avert it. In fact, while the inaugural address was being delivered in Washington, devoted altogether to saving this union without any war, there were already agents, insurgent agents, operating within the city, devoted altogether to destroying the union without any war, just divide effects by negotiation, I expect. Many have reached Washington under considerably better circumstances and with considerably better qualifications. I don't think anyone has ever reached it under the same circumstances with nearly all of the people who were now obliged to submit to that authority opposed his administration and him personally, and a good percentage of them bent on destroying one or the other or both. So we discovered, subsequent to that inauguration, that we had ourselves a fix. And we had really little available to us to remedy the situation. I don't think there was a man in command at present, at the time, who had ever commanded a force of more than 14,000. Certainly, I don't think there was anyone who'd ever seen a force of more than 16, and that's about all we had at the time. Today, General Grant commands a force of nearly 500,000. Changes that have taken place. At the time, there was not a man that had any clear understanding of strategy and tactics. From what I understand, it wasn't even being taught any longer in military academies. Military administration was rarely understood unless one happened to know much about French. The previous administration had sent our ships were scattered to the four corners of the earth. Our standing military, what few there were, had been sent largely to the western outposts. And so we found ourselves largely without the means to combat the great proposal that had landed upon our doorstep. And so I had to think very hard about how to proceed. With that in mind, I reckon perhaps the first step in any sort of administration, whether it is over a law office, as I have had, I've never been elected to an administrative post, but is to settle in your mind, what are your goals? Because if you don't know your goals, if you don't know what you're shooting at, you're sure to miss it. I think of the fella one time down, well, it was up in Tazewell County. I was standing next to him one day, and he said, "Hold still a minute. There's a squirrel up there." And he picked up his gun ever so careful, and he started blasting away at that thing. I couldn't see no squirrel. I said, "What are you shooting at?" He said, "Shh, you see that squirrel? He's telling me to be quiet, and he's blasting himself out." And I finally looked at him, and I said, "Jones, there ain't no squirrel in that tree." He's squinting and firing away, and I said, "There's a big old louse hanging on your eyebrow. That's what you're firing at." Now, some goals can change.